This will be my final video for 2022. I'm going to take a break for the rest of the week because I had to work a little bit overtime during the week. And I'll be on a very strange schedule after the first of the year. So, I'm going to play a little bit of Civilization on my computer here, and we're going to talk about some things. So first and foremost, I want to thank you guys immensely for helping my channel to grow. I never thought that I would ever get past 5 subscribers, and I see I got a viewer. Hello. Um, I never thought I would get past 5 subscribers. Now I'm in the 80s. Um, I never thought that anybody would want to listen to some hick from Southeast Kentucky talk about tabletop games, but here we are. Um, so I want to thank you guys, especially for all the support you've given me and for all the subscriptions and the views and everything. Um, I guess, do I have anything to talk about today? I would say a little bit about rulings. You see, I posted something on Twitter with Gygax about, a fantastic world where magic is real. And at the end of the day, that should be what our games are about, no matter the edition, right? So I know that I play basic fantasy RPG, so therefore I tend to go to those games that have to do um, more with the basic expert kind of rule sets, and I understand that not everybody plays that, but most of the people who watch my channel do. There's a few AD&D grognards out there, and I use that term not as not as a derogatory term. I immensely appreciate all the value that a lot of you guys that have been doing this longer than I've been alive have given me. Um, so really, my point was, whenever I posted that, is that you should make a campaign setting in which, whether you're running a module or if you're running homebrew or some mixture between the two, make it to where it's enthralling enough for your players to not want to question the plausibility of it. After all, it may be fantasy, but players still assume some kind of reasonable amount of physics behind the world, right? Like obviously gravity is a thing, time is a thing, although time works a little differently in a fantasy setting. But I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it works like our world. Maybe it goes faster. I mean, it's your game, right? So make a world in which your players at the end of the day don't want to question everything. They're happy to be immersed and just to be playing a game. You know what I mean? It's so hard to find people to play with, especially nowadays. There's not a lot of people that run the basic expert rule sets. There's not a lot of people that run the AD&D first edition or even second edition rule sets. Those rule sets are a little bit hard to find unless you run Osric or you have Swords and Wizardry, or for Golden Glory. I've been wanting to grab that one. You know what I mean? It's just not quite as available as the other ones. I'd like to have a hardback copy. I know it's available on, well, it's available on Lulu for like $13 for a soft cover. So maybe I'll get that one day. Just check it out because I'm always enthralled to wonder about the rule set that came out the same year I was born, the second edition one, right? So, um, I think if I could give any kind of tips, because I know I did this video before where I gave tips to new game masters, new referees, and I feel like I could have done it better. It was just me talking about what I know. Number one, be okay with the fact that you are going to make mistakes. That is, honestly, that was my first hurdle, right? Now, I think that's everybody's first hurdle that ever takes up that responsibility. You're terrified of the prospect that somebody, like, you might make a wrong call and somebody's going to call you out on it. Don't be afraid of it. Most people are most people are rational enough to where they understand that you are human, right? And that you are going to make bad calls and bad mistakes. And you should just be okay with that. Number two, if you're going to run a homebrew setting, don't think that you have to have this big, deep world with lore in it. That you're going to burn out so quick on doing that. And I would know. I did that with a separate campaign that doesn't even run anymore. So we put that on the back burner. Then everybody's like, I wasn't really having fun with this, and I was relieved because I was not having fun with it either. So do not for 1 second believe that you have to have this big fleshed out world. You don't. You want to know what you need. And it's something that I realized not only from the Gygax 75 challenge, but Morgan's Fort that I'm running right now, and I have B2. Hey brother, hope your holidays have been good. AD&D is where it's at. I'm looking at the player handbook now. Great channel. Blessings. Hey, thank you, brother. I appreciate the views. It has been great. It's been a little cold here. We're on the other end of an Arctic blast, so that was our temperature had been single digits. In fact, it was 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know if you use Celsius or Fahrenheit, and I'm sorry, I don't know Celsius right off the bat, but the high was 0 degrees Fahrenheit from Friday all the way up till yesterday, when the high was 18, and today the high is 30. Right now it's currently 28. So, but we had a good Christmas. The girls had fun. They loved their presents, and me and the wife, we're of course happy whenever they're happy. So, number two, okay, so getting back to my point, right? So don't think you have to have this big world, because learning not just from the Gygax 75 thing I did. I'm right across the Ohio River in Indiana. It's cold here also. I'm sure one of my players lives in Louisville, and so that's more or less the same temperature. I'm down in southeast Kentucky in the Appalachian Plateau. It's bad, and I'm sure it was bad up there for you guys too. But really, it was from Morgan's Fort, looking at Morgan's Fort, and even looking at B2, because I have the PDF for the Keep on the Borderlands by Gary Gygax, right? All you really need is to have one big town, two smaller towns, one big dungeon. You can even make it a mega dungeon if you want. If you want to, which the campaign setting I'm working on now, the mega dungeon is the main attraction, but I'm going to put some other places in there too if they want to explore that too, and put like 2 strange areas. And I use strange loosely. They can be dungeons, they can be something else. Your imagination is the only limit to this. But put 2 other adventure areas for your players, and that's all you need. And those can be immensely smaller than the dungeon if you need them to be. They could be 2-3 levels if you need them. They don't have to have like 40-50 rooms. So far, floor 1 of the mega dungeon I'm working on is up to 53 rooms, and I'm still not done. And that's just floor 1. So, thank you, honey. Hey, could you care to grab me something to drink, please? Yeah. Thank you. But glad you're still on fire for doing BX style old stuff. Your channel, page 9, first edition, realism. Yeah. So yeah, let me turn on. Let me see if I can bring that one chat right back up. I want to display the chat, live chat. Okay. Can I get that to pop back up? Because that went quicker than what I realized. Live chat. All messages are visible. So let me try to see if I can't. I'm going to rotate my device. It's going to do something weird. No, unfortunately I lost it. I'll tell you what, give me just a second. I want to interact with that one, so let me just get off my game here. I'm playing Civilization, by the way. I'm going to get off here. I'm going to look at it, because I do want to interact, because I do value your input. Let me save my game. I'm playing as Otto von Bismarck of Germany, by the way, because I did random, and that's who gave me, and I'm like, that's really stupidly good to have early in the game. I put it on. I put it on marathon, so it's like everything takes 3 times as long, so it's like a campaign, and it's, in case you guys are not familiar with the game, it's hex crawly pretty much. Um, okay, let me go to YouTube, and let me go to my channel, and I'll check out that live chat because I do want to interact. I'm sorry, I know I'm halting everything. Um, bear with me for just a second. I want to interact because I do value everybody's opinions and comments uh, whenever they comment on my, because it went quick in my eyes. I'm sorry, I've been staying up because I had to work day shift tomorrow, and I'm normally a night shifter, so I'm staying up. I've been up for 26 hours so far, and I got to make it to 10, and then I can go to bed and go to work tomorrow. So, okay, there's my channel. Okay, cool. I'm going to make the attempt not to have the audio. Okay, it's trying to. Okay, I want to make sure that I mute. Okay, I'm muted. Okay, so, okay, Retro DM Ray. Glad you're still on fire doing BX style old school stuff on your channel. Page 9 of the first edition DMG by Gary says that the highest degree of realism has been attempted. But he also stressed it isn't a realism simulation game. Verisimilitude and fantasy combined. Right, exactly. So, by the way, thank you for subscribing to me, Retro DM Ray. By the way, guys, if you are not subscribed to his channel or watch his stuff, definitely watch it. I've watched, I believe I watched all of his videos that he's got on his channel. So feel free to jump on and check his channel out. I think you'll enjoy it. So that'd be another tip I have for new referees and new game masters is to have one main attraction for your campaign setting, especially if it's homebrew. Have 2 small settlements or towns and 1 big city, and then have 2 adventure areas, and that's really all you need. And put like some mysterious. Thanks, man, for the shout out. You're welcome, brother. Hey, like I like. I like the content you put out, and when I got into the hobby, like I digested a lot of stuff. So, in fact, I was actually subscribed longer to your channel than I believe you were to mine. So, anyways, so real quick, getting back on track. Oh yeah, put some natural features in your world, especially if you're doing like point crawl or a hex crawl, whichever you do. Put some natural features in it. You can run a sandbox and have it point crawl, so don't think for a minute you can't. Really play around with the roads in your world. Play around with the pathways. Yeah, you'll have a main road that goes from town to town, but it might not always be clear, right? It certainly wasn't clear in the real world here, so just to point that out. But let's see, what else could I give for tips? So I know dice fudging is a thing. I don't do it, and I would implore game masters not to do it because I believe it's a very bad habit. So, caveat here, if you decide that you want to do this, never, ever, 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 ever admit to it. Hey, Retro DM Ray, I'm also subscribed to your channel, Quality Content, my brother. Yeah, like this is like I don't like to use the word community. It's a hobby. Like I feel like when you apply community to it, you apply a seriousness to it that is rather unfair to the game, really. It's just like how some people use it as therapy sessions. And don't get me wrong, there's something therapeutic about interacting with other human beings and having fun at a table. there's something therapeutic about that. But honestly, if you have a mental health issue, you should definitely try to get help for it from a professional. And I say that as somebody who actually sees a therapist for his anger management every week. So yeah, I'm not afraid to admit that. So, um, what else can I say? Um, the times I would say it's okay for a game master to fudge dice is normally with random generation stuff. Now, I don't always do it, but if I think a particular monster works out better, thanks, James. Cool. Yeah, man. This is the kind of support that this hobby needs, especially for some of us that run these different, you know, non-modern games. It's not exactly a very popular system to run. Um, but like if I roll for a random encounter, like a wandering monster table, or if I'm like when I'm generating my own dungeon or something, if I feel like, which actually have the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide because I've been using it for a few things, and it's like the great Mr. Gygax said, that everything has to work within some form of logic. Like obviously, um, if rooms, because it has a dungeon generator in the back, right? So you go to the back. Let me find the page. But like when it comes to loot, I randomly roll for that, and normally what the contents of the room are, I'll roll for that. Um, Not always, but 98% of the time I do. Like if I feel like, boy howdy, this is turning into a gauntlet. If they took this particular path, I should probably reward them if they made it this far. That's why I do that, and I believe there's that's when Game Master Fiat should come into the equation. Now, as for dice fudging in the middle of combat, I never do it. If you guys do it, great. Don't admit to it, just in case your players are on here. But I don't do it. And I know my players know that I don't do it because I TPK'd them in session 1. So, and my other group knows I don't do it because 2 of them died to an evil magic user that was basically a necromancer who had a turn to stone spell on him. Here we go. So appendices on page 169 of the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide actually has a lot of random dungeon generated rooms and contents and stuff like that. So like something that Gygax points out in this. Let me zoom in on this. Uh-oh. This is not the page I want to be on. Okay, so something that he stresses out in the first paragraph of his introduction to Appendix A, when you need help in designing a dungeon, whether it is a level in your main dungeon or a labyrinth discovered elsewhere, which that comes from a side adventuring area, put that in your game. Also make rumor tables. That's a mechanic that has fallen out. I know I've done a video on it, but that's a mechanic that has fallen out of favor in modern editions. To be honest with you, I believe that if modern editions had that particular mechanic, it would be more sandboxy. Like, I feel like, because that's the thing. 5e, in my opinion, is a perfectly playable game. I think the reason that I know everybody's heard about the Dungeon Master shortage, okay, and I'm not going to get into that, but I will say that not a lot of people do. Nobody I know seems to want to volunteer to take up that responsibility for 5e. So, that being said, that's my experience. I'm not going to broadly generalize. That's just my experience, and that's all I'm going to say on that. But I feel like if there is a Dungeon Master shortage, let's just say hypothetically there is. If there is a Dungeon Master shortage, It's because the philosophy of what a dungeon master should be is different than what the philosophy of what a dungeon master should be in accordance with OD&D, first edition AD&D, second edition AD&D, basic D&D, expert D&D, all these different sets, right? So, like the newer stuff seems like, especially when it comes to modules and campaign settings, they're super railroady, in my opinion, because it just exists to get you from point A to point B no matter what. And like if dice rolls don't matter, then why are you rolling dice? But so, anyways, get back to my point. The following random generation system has proven itself to be useful. It must be noted that the system requires time, but it can be used directly in conjunction with actual play. Discretion must prevail at all times. Skipping ahead. For example, if you have decided, if you, the game master or dungeon master or referee, whatever term you wish to use, if you have decided that a level is to be but one sheet of paper in size, and the die result calls for something which goes beyond an edge, amend the result by rolling until you obtain something which will fit with your predetermined limits. Common sense will serve. If a room won't fit, a smaller one must serve, and any room or chamber which is called for can be otherwise drawn to suit what you believe to be its best positioning. So that's an example of Mr. Gary Gygax, Gary Gygax himself. And I might also argue that modern systems are so focused on players that nobody wants to run, or even are encouraged to do so. I agree. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So that's from the words of Mr. Ernest Gary Gygax himself. To fit the dungeon to what your predetermined notions are. Now, something I have a problem with in the Gygax challenge is that it suggests, in my opinion, too few rooms. It tells you to roll. I believe I've got the PDF here. I don't want to look it up, but it's like a couple of D6s plus a flat number. And in my opinion, that's too few rooms, especially for what is a mega dungeon. A mega dungeon is this big sprawling place, and for some people it has a definitive end, it's finite, but for some people, like it's ongoing. It's like this randomly generated thing. It's just something the game master keeps bringing back every week with a different floor, with a different room. In fact, a lot of game masters used to run it back in the day by, if the party leads go back to town and then come back, it's the first floor is totally different than what it was when they went in. So mapping is almost useless, except for helping the players find their way back to get back to town. So, just as an example. But that being said, that would be an example of acceptable dice fudging, in my opinion, and for fitting your planned areas, like planning an area out. So,
I have some cheese sauce left. You want it? I a lot though.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I'm actually going to get ready to get off and have lunch here in a second. So, I'm going to try to wrap this up real quick. But that's just as an example, right? So, I believe also because Retro DM brought it up, Mr. Ray brought it up, that modern systems are so focused on players that nobody wants to run them. That's exactly right, in my opinion. You see, I'm actually a player in a 5e campaign, and I know I've stated several times in several videos that I would never want to be a DM in it, and that's primarily because of that. Because certain people, and I believe this was always a thing since WotC purchased the license from TSR when TSR went bankrupt. But so, like, the philosophy was very much into building a character instead of simply playing a character. And so when you're building, now this is a term that is used, I'm going to use it for example for what I used it a lot for. Dark Souls. Everybody that knows and has been subscribed to me for a long time knows that I've uploaded Dark Souls and Bloodborne stuff. And so I talk about builds all the time. So you're building a character to be the most efficient and effective way possible to kill everything as fast as possible. And so that's more or less the same philosophy with a lot of the modern systems. For players to be able to get all these feats and skills now, I personally, like, especially once I found the OSR and found basic systems. Hey Tibble! What's up? Ran 5e for 8 years or so now. Players almost always show up for a huge backstory for their players and have at least some expectation to have it integrated some way with the game. Exactly. So, with the responsibility of the game master, like I said earlier, everybody has this unfair, I would say it's very unfair for them to expect a game master to serve as this big world builder on the same scope as Tolkien. 5e caused GM burnout for me many times. Yeah, I can imagine so. So everybody has this, wants the game master to have this Tolkien-esque world already packaged for them. When, as I said, all you really need is one big city, 2 towns, 2 little side areas, and a big dungeon, and you have enough for a campaign setting if you're building your own thing. And put some random tables in there. But like I said, with the current situation, it stresses a lot on not only making sure that the players get their skills and feats, which is something that, as I've gone along and once I discovered the BX rules and everything like that, I've actually personally detested feats and skills. Like, I feel like it feels too video gamey to me. And here's the thing: I love video games. I really do. I love to play them. It's like everything else; it's a hobby. But I don't go to my tables, like, number one, when I play 5e as a character, I'm not going in there wanting to be a video game character. And likewise, when I run my games, I don't run them like a video game. I don't put this big cinematic thing in front of them. I don't put this predetermined thing. I say, here you are, and here's something that you know about, and there you go. And so, like, now I will say that the most railroady thing is I'll ask my players, do you want to jump straight into this? Do you want to just kind of feel your way around? 9 times out of 10, they want to just go ahead and get into the dungeon, so that they go ahead and get a feel for how the game is going to be. And so they, like, Morgan's, for example, it has 2 different setups. It has a setup where you can go straight into the dungeon, or you can just piddle fart around town and find an NPC that'll tell you about the old island fortress. In addition to a couple of different things. And it has rumor tables and stuff like that. And so that's why I like. So just to kind of, because Tibble's actually one of my players, so I'm not going to spoil anything. But yeah, just an example, right? What else can I think of? So, yeah, like, it seems to, in addition, and I think that's where a lot of the philosophy, like, there's a lot of bad GM tips out there for people. Game Master, Dungeon Master tips, whatever. There's a lot of bad material out there. Not just on YouTube, but on the internet in general. And like everything, you eat the meat, spit out the bone. But there's a lot of them bad out there, and I find it very funny when in the same video or article they tell you not to railroad your players and to not try to write a novel or whatever. In the same article and video, they tell you to make sure that your character's deaths make sense narratively. And I'm like, what? And what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, What? They have to die to the big bad evil guy, or can they die to the goblin? Because my Thursday night group died to wolves. They got killed by wolves first thing. It's just what happened. So the dice said these characters are going to die, and the dice were correct. They died. So, anyways, just I find it like a cognitive disconnect to tell people on one hand, don't railroad and don't try to write a novel, and then at the other set they tell you to try to have a story reason for why a player character died. It's just like, it doesn't exist within every 5e circle. Okay, so I'm just going to say that, like, I'm not broadly generalizing. I'm just saying that, because it's always the loudest, the people who yell the loudest are the ones that you're going to pay attention to the most, right? And so, like, you have these people that will get on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and this, that, and everything else and tell you, on the one hand, they want to play a game, but on the other hand, they only want their characters to die when they're ready for them to die. And it's like, when you make, like, because it's just like, you can retire your character at any time and play something else. Like, but in my games, if you retire your character and decide you want to play something else, that something else is going to start out at level 1. Now, I have particular house rules in play. For one group that was coming from more modern systems that weren't used to OSRs, I did put resurrection as an option. You know what I mean? From priests in town. So, like, just to kind of help, because it can sting, especially coming from that. And I'm not a fool. I'm not an idiot, and I do try to be accommodating to my players. I don't let them run my table, but but I've never had that problem with them trying to run my table. You know what I mean? Like, it's always been that mutually beneficial, respectful thing. So, like, they get what my job is, and I get why they're there, and what they want to do. It's about the player, not the character. You can always make a new PC, but it's really hard to find a great player who becomes a friend with you at the table. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there, Ray. So, like, people understand why. Like, I understand why they're playing. They want to immerse themselves. They want to get away from life. And I'm running the game because I'm the same way. I want to get away from life. I want to immerse myself, whether I made the world or not. I want to just get into a thing and, like, see what they do with it. Because I'll tell you what. Like, I learned some interesting things from how players approach a situation that I probably never would have thought of. For example, Tibble, he's in the group. Same with Brian, who's also a subscriber. Their group decided we're going to build barriers so that we can choke off particular points of this room so that we don't get ambushed. And it's like, wow, that was actually a really good idea. And so, like, I made some rulings on that, and, like, I felt they were fair. And I based them off of real life statistics to try to help orient me into how I should rule this. So that all came from out of gameplay, since normally when they go back to town, it signals the end of the session. But sometimes I'll let the session go on when they're in town too. It depends on what they want. Which, by the way, all of them are at least level 2 now. So, that particular group is a success. So, particular house rule I have, by the way, is that if it's your first character, you roll 3d6 down the line. You get full health, full possible health. I think that's a fair enough house rule to have. Because I'm not a sadist. And to be honest with you, the difference between full health and 1 HP is, at level 1, is kind of splitting hairs at that point anyway. But, might add a little survivability, especially for the fighters. But, to continue on, the whole thing with my groups that I run is that on your second characters, if your first character dies, you can roll your stats still 3d6, but you can allot them to whatever stats you want. And then I made up another house rule to where if a player character happens to be at second level and they die, if the party spends a particular amount of gold to have a funeral and they have to retrieve the body, this has to be retrievable. So if, like, they got ate by a dragon, they're either going to have to go find their buddy in some dragon poop later down the road, or just leave them behind and the player has to roll a new character. Depends on how they want. But, or if they're dissolved, it's over. I'm sorry. Level 1 character. I don't know what else to say. But basically, if they have a funeral and like have this whole 3 days go by, which a lot can happen in 3 days in a dungeon, you don't know what you're coming back to. You know what I mean? So, like, a particular amount of gold is spent and so many services are done, blah blah blah. The next succeeding character for that player can have the same amount of experience points that the previous one had. You know what I mean? But like, it's a gold sink. You know what I mean? It's a way to take money from from the players and the characters, right? So like, how bad do you want this? You know what I mean? Like, give them something, and that's just a personal house rule I have. It was just some idea that I ran into on the internet, and I thought to myself, that's an interesting idea. I want to try to do that. So whether or not that works out, I don't know. I haven't had to use it yet, and they haven't had to use it yet. In fact, they probably don't even realize the existence of it, because I just typed it in one night while I was bored on my Discord server, like, because I have a list of house rules I have, and it's like, hey, there's this. So there's that. What else can I think about before I get off? Because I'm getting hungry and my food's sitting there right in front of me, and it smells good. I guess, because I do want to stay on this whole new tips for DM things. Oh yeah. Don't be afraid of your character or of your players not having fun. Because I promise you, if they weren't having fun, they wouldn't keep coming back to the table. Now, honesty is the best policy. So this goes for players too. With that one group I ran, when I had that one Frankenstein system where I had this big world set up, and it was like this mixed smash of modern stuff. Like, I wasn't having fun, and they weren't having fun, but they just weren't telling me. And I had to be the first one to say, hey guys, you want to do something else? I'm not having fun. And they're like, actually, yeah. And I'm like, thank goodness, because I'm not having fun. Like, so honesty is the best policy. If you want to run something else, run something else. But as far as my OSR games are concerned, I've never had that happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's because I don't subscribe to the whole 6-session statistic thing. I don't, because it's such a finite thing. You know what I mean? It's not I don't think it's a very good indicator of what the state of the hobby is necessarily. You know what I mean? Because the 5e group I'm in, I've been a player for a year and a half in that particular group. But hey, Fred, there are a lot of interesting ideas out there, and to listen to channels like yours and Retro Ray's. Exactly. Retro Ray's getting all the stinking recommendations today, man. I don't know how much he's going to get from my little channel, because his is immensely bigger than mine. Yeah, compared to my 80 whatever subscribers, yeah, it's quite a bit bigger than mine. But what's that game you want me to get? I'll tell you later, honey. Have your lunch, man, and get some rest for work. Got to take care of the wife and kiddos. Get back with us when you're able. It's cool. Thanks, Fred. You're welcome, Ray. So, like you said, anyways, I promise your players are having fun. Because most of the time, like, when you think things are getting too off the rails, I promise you, they're there for exactly that reason. They don't want to be on rails. They want to go somewhere. Now, some will want to cut to the chase, like, hey, I want to go to the dungeon. And I try to logically think of if there's a way that they would hear about it. And so, like, for example, Morgan's Fort, I bring it up again. There's 2 scenarios in which they find out about Old Island Fortress. Old Island Fortress is a fairly popular spot for adventurers in this area of the world. And so, it makes logical sense for them to just hear about it. Or for them to even come to Morgan's Fort to begin with, specifically just to go to it. You know what I mean? Like, it has that lore about it within its own world within that module. That's about as railroady as that particular campaign setting gets. It's the only, and that I would argue that's probably not even a railroad at that point, because a railroad doesn't make logical sense. This does. You know what I mean? So like it makes sense that the characters would probably hear about this thing because because even the no, I need to leave that alone because Tibble might still be on, and I'll be spoiling things. So no, never mind. I almost let it slip. So the whole thing pretty much makes logical sense for them to say, I want to go to the dungeon, and I say, okay, here you go. I'll roll some things, see if they encounter something on the way, and if they don't, they make it there without incidents. And so far, they've made it there without incidents. In fact, I think the only thing they've seen so far is wildlife, but I could be mistaking that for the other group. I can't remember. But most of the time, they haven't seen anything. So, alright. I'm going to close this one out. So this is the final video of 2022, guys. Like I said, I started this year, I didn't think my channel was going to blow up the way it did. 85 subscribers. I'm looking at that on the screen right now. 85. That is 80 more than I ever thought I would have. I've had a year full of craziness. I went from a job that I worked at for 10 years, went to a totally new job, got screwed there by politics, so I quit because my old bosses called me saying, hey, we want you back, and I went back. I don't have the seniority I used to have, but I still have the experience to where I went back to being a tooling mechanic, which was something that I honestly missed because, believe it or not, I love my job. I take great pride in it. Most guys my age don't know how to weld. They don't know how to fabricate anything. They don't know how to run a lathe. They don't know how to use a plasma torch. They don't know how to do any of that. So they don't know how to use a mill. So that's something that I missed. And so during that time when I was at that other job, I had no time to play at all. So for 6 months, I had nothing. And then when I went back to the factory, and I knew I was going back. Once I put in my 2 weeks notice at the other place, it's like, all right, I want to get a game going again. I have 3 now. I have a play-by-post and 2 live games, weekly live games. So, I really don't know what else to say, but thank you guys, really. I thank you for the support. I thank you for the subscriptions. I thank you for the encouragement too. I've learned a lot in the last couple of years because that's the whole thing about being the game master. You're constantly growing, coming up with new ideas to run the game. Now, nobody runs it exactly the same. The way I run my game might not be the same way you run your game. Might not be everybody's cup of coffee, right? But be that as it may, I care about the rules. I try to be fair, impartial, but most importantly, I try to make sure my players have fun by stepping out of the way when I don't need to be in the way. So, excuse me. As we get ready to go into 2023, thanks everyone. Good stream. This has been a nice break in my day. Hey, thank you for joining us, Fred. I appreciate it. So this will be the last one until after January 1st. So as I get ready to close this out, thank you guys for the tips, the encouragement. Yeah, you've made this a great year for my humble little channel of just some monotonous hick talking about a nerdy little thing. But I thank you guys because I mean the whole point is we have fun with this game, right? And we try to escape the real world. Blessings for a great evening. Hey, thank you for joining us, James. So as always, take care. God bless, and as always, see you on the other side. You guys stay safe out there, especially as for some of us in the region we're in. It's so cold. Me too, y'all. Thank y'all. Hey, thank you, Ray. Thank you for the support. Once again, if you haven't if you're not subscribed to Retro DM Ray's channel, you need to be. He talks about basic and expert sets. He talks about basic fantasy. He talks about basically anything that has to do with the Mold Bay Cook stuff, right? So, and the Gygax. He talks about Gygax. Gygax's rule sets and stuff like that. So, the whole point is to enjoy our nerdy little world. So, you know, it's so weird to me to think how many people were into it and how crushing it is to me that not enough people in my personal life are into it, aside from a few personal friends. But, you know, that's the way it's always been. So, anyway, I need to properly close this out. So, again, thank you. Take care. God bless. See you on the other side. And have a happy, safe 2023. Nerd rocks.